Hello and welcome back to Get the Scoop with Smirks. We're thrilled to bring you episode 18. And yeah, I know it's been a while, but we're back. So today I'm joined by my colleagues Jessica Warden, VP of Sales Business Development, and Garrett McBride, our VP of Operations. And in this episode, we're diving into the fall 2025 harvest. I know it's crazy. Here we are getting into football season. We're somehow thinking about leaves changing and Halloween and all those things. It doesn't feel like we're there yet, but we are, folks. And we're going to be covering bulk, organic, and conventional nuts, seeds, grains, coconut, and dried fruits. And this time of year, there's a lot of buzz happening because bulk ingredient users want to know what's happening. They want to know what the projections are for the coming season. So our goal today is really to give you some clear takeaways. We want to talk to you about what's happening with supply and demand, the pricing outlook, why the market is moving the way that it is, recommendations for coverage and contracting. So those are the key things. And, the Smirks team doesn't have a crystal ball, but we'll do our best to provide insights on the markets based on the intel that we have now. And we're also going to dive into tariffs, who pays them, how Smirks is handling them, and most importantly, how we're keeping our customers in the loop. So without further ado, Jessica and Garrett, I say grab your scoop and let's dig in.
Oh no, this is exciting, Elisa. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here, Garrett. As Elisa mentioned, fall is always such a really dynamic time, both inside of the food supply chain, but also one of my favorite seasons personally. I can't believe that it's already, that we're here, but it'll be Christmas before we know it. And so before that happens, let's get some information out there for all of our friends in the old food supply.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me too. I'm excited to be here. It's been a while. We need to get our chops back. From an operations perspective, this is when things really heat up. This is the fun time of year. We're busy coordinating supply chains, monitoring crop quality, making sure that we're positioned in a way that we can support our customers adequately. There's definitely plenty to talk about this season.
All right. Well, before we jump into the market reports, Garrett, I'm hoping you can really shed some light on an important topic on a lot of people's minds. How do tariffs on imported ingredients impact buyers, and how is Smirks handling these types of changes that are going on right now?
Yeah, oh boy, now more than ever, tariffs are playing a big role in imported ingredient costs. The impact varies by origin, by country, but it's going to be there. It's here to stay for the time being. Importers like Smirks pay the tariffs that are imposed by, in this case, the federal government. Those tariff costs are then passed on to buyers. Tariff schedules are constantly changing, constantly evolving, depending on what's going on politically, with our government and the interactions between governments around the world. Keeping up with the changes and staying up to date can be very challenging. We work very closely with our freight forwarders and other regulatory information sources to monitor the tariff schedules in real time. As often as we possibly can, our customers are informed about the pricing changes as a result of the tariffs that have been imposed by the federal government. In order to make your lives easier, our customers' lives easier, we are able to break out the tariff costs separately as a completely unique line item from the product costs on order confirmations. Just to be aware, Smirks doesn't mark up the tariffs. We're not in business to gouge as a result of these incremental costs. These are a pass-through. Whatever Smirks is charged, we charge our customers straight through. Our goal is to keep you informed, confident, and feeling supported. And as always, we welcome any questions about the tariffs and the pricings because it is a confusing landscape to navigate.
Yep, definitely.
Thanks so much for giving us that rundown, Garrett. I know it can be pretty confusing, and let's face it, tariffs are influencing buying patterns. When one country's tariff is lower than another, or sourcing can shift pretty quickly. With this in mind, Smirks is also, just keep in mind that we also offer domestically produced ingredients, and it's starting to be the case that sometimes the U.S. products are becoming more competitive than the imported products these days. So that's something to keep in mind. And I just as soon jump right into it here. Let's get into the heart of the matter. First off, love to chat about nuts. So what are we seeing right now in terms of the organic and conventional nut market, Jessica? What are you seeing?
It's actually a really interesting time in the nut market in the sense that we would have expected to be, knee deep in almond and walnut contracts, and in some cases, folks are right. There's some coverage and some stuff on the books, but there's also a little bit of uncertainty happening, especially in almonds, and so I know Garrett will touch on that a little bit, but like with walnuts, the crop is looking good. There was some, favorable outlook, great weather, a lot of good news around the bloom, but we're just starting to see where I think coming off of last year's very tight crop and supply, it's all good news, but it's one of those things where it's still just a little bit early, where the walnut objective measurement report usually comes out early September. So we're just, about a week early here with this information. But everything that we're seeing is pointing to better circumstances than last year. But coverage is still at a slight premium because there was such a shortfall last year. So keep us in mind as you start to plan for walnuts, in the sense that here in the next couple weeks is actually going to be a really good time to continue to dive back into that market.
Awesome. So the Smirks team will keep everybody posted on that one. And moving right along, I'd like to chat a little bit about hazelnuts. I had a great conversation with Troy Johnson, president of Hazelnut Growers of Oregon, and he spent 30 years in the nut business and closely following hazelnuts. Yep. So definitely appreciate his
great partner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he gave me some scoop, and the organic and conventional numbers for hazelnuts are combined. So just so you know, when we talk these numbers, it's both. So the Turkish crop is like 480,000 metric tons with 150,000 metric ton carryover, but that's down from 920,000 metric overall crop last year. Wow. Yeah. So, he says there's a lot of combinations happening here, but it's due to frost, bugs, and drought in the main growing areas in Turkey. And Turkish interest rates are just sky high, and the processors also can't afford the bank financing to go out and buy the nuts. So unless they have the cash on hand, that's another tough situation that's happening. And, just in general, the crop is late and there's a significant number of blanks on the trees. You're probably not surprised to hear that as well, because a lot of us have already heard the fact that some of the growing areas in Turkey have impacted the apricot and the fig growing areas. And so it's really the same situation. That we're facing here. So, and at lower elevations, the crop was fared a bit better, but still not great. Better in the higher elevations, though. Italy is like 50% of its normal production, and it's like the third biggest producer in the world. The Chilean crop is good, but that said, they have a lower processing capacity. Sure. So, this year it's actually looking like the USA is expecting a record crop of 119,000 metric tons, which is like 34% higher than last year. So domestic processors are, going to really try to balance out the demand for this item, and the USA could be a great option for high quality product this year.
Yeah,
that's great news.
Yeah.
One thing there's a silver lining here.
Exactly. And one thing I've learned just over the last couple of years, kind of sitting in on some of these like PTMPA pieces, is that the varietals are changing in the U.S. Growing regions. So they're a little bit more robust, and they've had to really deal with some of the varietals that were susceptible to like a very specific bug that I can't remember off the top of my head now, but that should help. And obviously we're seeing it in the numbers. And then the other really fun part is that some of the varietals can now start to be blanched, which was always the, tough thing with the U.S. option, was that it had a hard time being blanched and coming through that process. So that'll be one to keep watching. I think it'll be fun to see what happens with U.S. hazelnuts there.
It definitely will. And the indication is that they really want to try to service the market.
Sure.
They want to try to put out a reasonable price because they want this product to continue to grow, and they feel like there's an opportunity for hazelnuts to have their moment.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I mean, the processors are going to do their best from the U.S. perspective to get out a reasonable price that people can still bear and still grow the market, because they see that the product could very well have its moment the way pistachios have had, and that's kind of their perspective. But in brief, the recommendation is really, if you're going to get Turkish products, seek coverage sooner than later, because near the end of the season, they just may not be able to come through with the product, unfortunately. And then you can be booking pretty much year round for USA products. So that's, again, the bright spot in the market.
Yep. Shameless sales plug. We have a little bit of organic Turkish on hand now. So, give your trader a ring if you need, some short-term immediate coverage.
Lock it up.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Great. Well, speaking of that almond market that Jessica alluded to, let's dive right into it, Garrett. What do you have for us?
You bet. Yeah, the same growing conditions, the positive growing conditions that Jessica mentioned around walnuts, are the factors in play for almonds as well in the Central Valley of California. It was a really good year, for beef light, for weather. Conditions were really great. However, there's some contradictory information flying around out there about almonds. USDA released their objective report a few weeks back, and they were predicting a massive crop, a 3 billion pound crop waiting to be harvested, which is great news for buyers. However, those in the almond world are convinced that the USDA number is severely overstated. Their estimates, within the almond industry are more in the 2.6 to 2.8 billion pound range. So we'll have to see what shakes off, literally. The harvest is currently underway, and with minimal carry-in, most sellers are not on the market until they see what actually comes off the trees. So in the next 3 to 4 weeks or so, the situation should become a bit more clear, and we're pulling for 3 billion pounds.
Yep. And I mean, that's one thing to note there too, is the organic market is such a small, composition or makeup of that larger number. And so that's even, been projected to be slightly tighter. And you've got some, not nearly as many players in that game. So we're seeing organic pretty firm right now. And like Garrett said, not a lot of carryovers, so not a lot of offers, not a lot of, even stocks where people were holding stuff to carry them through new crops. So that's one we're watching pretty closely, because we do have a lot of interest early, but not a lot of folks ready to make some offers and get some stuff booked. So
the two of you, are your thoughts basically to get in touch with Smirks and say, hey, I'm going to be needing this amount or this amount, and as soon as you can put an offer in front of me, do so? Is that your recommendation, especially for organic?
I would definitely say so. It's like trying to get into that new restaurant that's opening. You want to get on the wait list so that you're first in line for that phone call. That's what we're doing here, I think. So.
Yeah, bring your forecast, so we can have some productive conversations around the planning pieces, and then as soon as the market opens up a bit, we'll have hopefully a jump on competition.
Sure.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thanks for that important update on almonds. And Jessica, we've all heard about the Dubai chocolate craze. It's wild. So how has that really affected the pistachio market, and what do you see like going forward for this season?
Well, I mean, depending on who you chat with, you get some people who are like, oh yeah, that's a fad that's, worked its, way to its peak and is on its downward trend. And then I think it's also still a little bit to be determined because you're coming into the holiday like season. So obviously most of the production has been done for some of that stuff, but I think it'll be interesting to see the consumer, sentiments through the holiday around Dubai chocolate, see how much it continues to carry. And then that'll be timed obviously with new crops. So it's just kind of interesting. I, for one, am still loving the Dubai chocolate, and I like that there's like 10 different options in the grocery store that you can get at any one time. Like, yes, they don't mind if I do try this new Dubai chocolate. So, I think it's been interesting in whether it's Dubai chocolate or some other thing. I think one of the things the pistachio especially some of the big players here in the US have done is just develop a market around that item. So if it's not going into Dubai chocolate, there's always some outlet that they are really pushing, and so it's one of our favorite premium nuts. And so the crop is, this is basically you see an on year, off year. Last year was a little bit of an off year relative to output. So this is what folks say is, an on year. So in shell production is estimated to about 726, thousand metric tons. And it represents a 44% increase from last season. So that kind of shows you that, on off year. And the other thing that's very interesting right now is that export demand has been pretty subdued in these early, or in these last couple months. We're in the same position as almonds and walnuts where, not everything has really shaken out and harvest is just kind of starting to get underway. So a lot of these numbers are preliminary projections. But between the increase in supply and the demand from overseas being a little subdued, even with the tight carryover from last year, we're in a pretty good position. So right now is a really great time for buyers where we have, some high incoming supplies, some, soft near term export demand, creates a pretty favorable environment for securing some of those forward and spot contracts, and really maybe getting some much better pricing, especially relative to the surges in pricing that we saw at the end of this last year. And I mean, if you were to ask somebody for pistachios right now, there's just really none to be found. So I know people are waiting with bated breath for that, availability, and so that they can make some more Dubai chocolate, I think is what it's all about. So.
Sounds like that's about to change.
Exactly.
Right on. Well, thanks for that. Good stuff. And I'm really curious about pecans. I mean, Garrett, maybe you can enlighten us because the growing regions were hit pretty hard by Hurricane Helene in September last year. And from what I understand, I mean, a lot of the mature trees were lost. So that said, what are they predicting kind of going forward? What's that look like?
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, between the hurricane losses on the East Coast and the fact that it is an off season this year, pecan markets are expected to remain pretty firm throughout the coming year. 2025 crop is expected to be about 22 to 25% less than last year in 2024, but demand continues to increase. So obviously we're moving in different directions there, and it's not helping, from a cost stability standpoint. Organic pecans will be even more constrained. It's a proportionality game. There's only so many organic trees and orchards in existence, and they represent a certain portion of the entire capacity. And when the entire capacity is low,
right,
the entire capacity of the organic crop is low as well. We recommend that those who are planning to consume large quantities of pecans, especially when it comes to organic, should probably lock in most of their needs for the coming year in the next few months to ensure availability. It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah. I mean, and I think one of the things that we've seen is pricing has been pretty firm, as we've ended the season. And so sometimes people hesitate to cover because they see prices kind of high. But I definitely don't think there's really a lot where we're poised for a major softening or a major correction. So if you're able to get bookings now at kind of today's pricing, I think it's pretty indicative of what we'll see even as new crop availability comes forward. So
it's probably not going to get better.
Yeah.
Sounds like reasonable advice in these times for pecans. Good to know. All right. Well, Jessica, what are we hearing about pine nuts this season? I mean, I'm always just so amazed when I see the image of the collectors climbing the trees to to grab the cones. It just blows my mind. And it's just not surprising that it's such a premium product. But what can we really expect this coming season?
I think the summer season is really going to be interesting in that last season cedars were had an off year, and the red variety kind of made up the difference. We're hearing that cedars are having a similar crop size as last year, so again, not anticipated to be a large crop. But we're also hearing that the red pine nut crop will be smaller than last year. So where there was a little bit of, gap made up or coverage, gap made up by the other variety, we might not see that as much this year. Couple that with the fact that there's such heavy tariffs being levied against anything that's grown in China. It makes, the Yunnan option not necessarily cost prohibitive, but certainly not, where it was in the past. And so what we're seeing is the varieties that are grown maybe in Mongolia or other areas that are then processed in China are offering the best value, but they're just not quite as plentiful. So we'll definitely be watching that market. Pricing has surged over the last couple of weeks even. But I mean, that's pine nuts for you. They're probably one of the most volatile commodities that we follow. And so again, this is what we know right now, and we'll keep watching it. We as Smirk still have a pretty decent coverage and supply available in warehouse from current crop, and we'll be working on planning for forward coverage. But that's definitely one of those ones that's like cover what you need, and maybe don't jump out too far in the future, unless you're just really sure that you're going to need like the cedar specifically or a specific varietal that you want to make sure to get before coverage isn't available.
Appreciate those insights. Thanks so much on that. And when we turn to macadamia nuts, the landscape for macadamia nuts has just changed so much in the last couple of years. I remember back in 2023 when there was a big supply and the prices of this historically premium nut had pretty much dipped into the area of being very much affordable. Then by the middle of the last year, I'd say the demand started to increase and stocks tightened up. What's it looking like for 2025 for Max, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely remember, that huge drop, and I was relatively new to the industry. So for me, the relative, change was not as shocking, or maybe as shocking as it should have been, without the context. But I actually was just looking the other day at some indications of old pricing indications I stumbled across. And I saw what I was offering Max for, and my jaw hit the floor, and I was just like, wow, they should have definitely bought at that price, So that's kind of, Max for 2025 in a nutshell, so to speak. The supply will definitely remain tight. South Africa, which is one of our, larger, as a U.S., import, that's one of the places we get, larger producing regions that we source from. So they're seeing a decline in their crop. About 4% is what's being projected right now. And then Australia's harvest is down pretty substantially. So it's down by about 30%. So that really leaves Kenya and, a couple other growing regions like Guatemala to offer, some of the pressure relief for that. But, it's just going to be interesting to see because there's just not going to be quite as much availability. And again, premium prices with tariffs, it all kind of just compounds really. So we don't anticipate a lot of softening. There's just not a lot of things indicating a market correction here in the near future. So I would say the limited availability, combined with the rising trade frictions, make early contracting really important. So if you haven't looked at some of your coverage needs now, it's definitely a great time to reach out and secure. And then that will help, some of those price pressure increases. And then we'll start to, get some more information in early Q1 about what, the next growing cycle will look like. So really you just got to kind of plan for, this time through, into Q1 of next year to really get a jump on that. Smirks has some, great options for organic style 1s, 4s, and 6s arriving, here in mid to late September. And then we'll have another wave of organic Max hitting our warehouses in late Q4. So we're well positioned where not everything's been, allocated and contracted. So we can definitely help with some of that planning going forward.
Great news that we have availability. Awesome. So if we shift gears going into cashews, we've seen a lot of demand for cashews arising, and um, I'm just looking at it thinking, Garrett, how is this shift affecting the market, and what's really happening on the supply side with cashews?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Elisa. Global demand is definitely on the rise, led by China, India, and the USA. And who can blame people? It's a great nut. Unfortunately for buyers, though, supply is not keeping pace with the demand increases. Raw cashew nut supplies have been very difficult to come by this year for a variety of reasons. Um, Probably the biggest being the weather.
Sure.
African growing regions have had extreme drought and heat that's constrained their raw cashew nut supply. Vietnam has experienced some monsoon weather patterns that resulted in excessive moisture, which constrained their supply. In fact, they're importing a lot of nuts from Cambodia. That all being said, Vietnam's still going to show less this season, even with the imports from Cambodia, than they did last year in 2024. Um, so it's going to be a somewhat challenging year for cashews from a raw material standpoint. Um, Elsewhere in the world, the reciprocal tariff situation here in the U.S. has functionally removed Brazil's cashew volume from play, just so cost prohibitive, especially when it comes to organic
Right.
nuts. These tariffs have just put a lot of additional pressure on the market and made a challenging situation that much more difficult to navigate. Right now, whole kernels are pretty readily available. Broken grades are getting harder and harder to source. So our recommendation, if you're buying or in the market for cashews, bring us your forecast now. Let's evaluate what's available, what we anticipate being available, get your contract set up so that we can ensure that you have adequate supply for the coming year, regardless of what happens. Let us leverage our long-term existing supply partners and options for you.
Sounds like great advice. Appreciate that update on cashews. And I'm going to give us an update on Brazil nuts. I know the harvest season normally runs like December to April across Brazil, Bolivia, and Peru, and it peaks like January through March. Um, there have been some major disruptions, though. The 2025 harvest was hit pretty hard by an extreme drought in the Amazon. And then you couple that with political and economic turmoil going on in Bolivia, who's the largest exporter. It's been challenging. Um, they've had actually violent competition for raw material collectors, and also those raw material collectors are being restricted due to illegal mining going on in some of the same areas. So it's been a real challenge. Plus the fact that there's a severe foreign currency shortage really since 2024, which has paralyzed the sector. So production is really seeing a decline. Brazil saw communities lose up to 80% of their crop. Overall harvest was expected to be down like 30 to 45% versus normal. Peru's crop fell about 20%, but it's complicated by inflows of smuggled Bolivian nuts, so that's a little bit muddled. But again, there's a real market impact here. The Brazil nut market is facing one of the tightest supply years in recent memory, with the drought and instability going on. It's really going to reshape the 2025-2026 outlook. So, looking ahead to 2026, we definitely expect prices to remain high. And I think we all know that they've just been difficult to find. I mean, Brazil nuts, there's not a lot of offers out there. So this is definitely one where you're going to want to put your needs out there, and we'll do our best to lock it up for you.
Yep. And this one's interesting in the sense that it is also so volatile because it's, gathered versus, obviously drought impacts how much the yields come off the tree, but some of the supply availability is really tied to the economics of what it means to gather this, commodities. So as prices creep up, the collectors that are on the ground have more incentive to go further in, to the where the nuts are. But then again, as the market comes down after supply eases, they have less, incentivization and to go further. So the supply demand volatility with this is unique to things like Brazil nuts, and even pine nuts are kind of similar. So again, it's nice to know that we can plan ahead for where we can, but very interesting about the drought and the other pieces that you mentioned, influencing the pricing. I hadn't realized all those factors were at play.
Yeah, there's just some security challenges
Yeah,
where even the most incentivized collector might be a little bit nervous right
right.
now.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense.
um,
Crazy.
we'll definitely see how it
Yeah,
goes. But if you can get your hands on Brazil nuts, if you get an offer, I probably it's a good idea to pull the trigger on it, I'd
yeah,
say.
yeah.
Agreed.
What do you think, Garrett? Do you think I could start growing some in my backyard? Some trees?
I think so, and I'll come collect them if
You
I'm
come
so
help? All right,
incentivized.
great. Well, enough about Brazil
Those
nuts.
are, yeah, yeah. All right. Well, hey, let's shift gears a little bit away from nuts. So let's take a look at the seeds and
Yeah,
grains. This is a big category for Smirks, and I'd say the biggest, and therefore I want you both to weigh in, is for as far as we're concerned, is really sunflower seeds. So tell me about what's happening. You guys decide who starts. Go.
you both,
Jessica,
Garrett.
have at it.
All right, I'll go. So this is an item that we track really closely, actually both domestically and from overseas. We have active imports from the EU growing regions, and then we also work very closely with some of our very best partners, actually, that we work with in the industry, and long-standing partners are from the U.S. Market. So I can speak a little bit more to the domestic market, where we're starting to see that the confectionery grade or confectionery types kernel planting acres are down as a kind of year over year comparison, and they've really been kind of swapped out with like the black oil variety being planted in their place. And a lot of that it's kind of like a two-pronged thing. So some of it is because they're growers are trying to bolster the availability for seeds for crushing. But there's also this regulation relating to the different pesticides that can be used to manage certain weevils, and it impacts the ability to successfully grow and have high yields on some of the food grade options. So it's actually a little bit more advantageous for farmers to grow like bird seed and oil grade variety this year. So it's kind of like this is the path of least resistance, so to speak. So we're starting to see domestic supply slightly constrained there. But again, they had some, decent growing conditions. So there was some heat there for a while where people weren't sure how it was going to pan out. But in the last couple of weeks, there's been some good weather as seeds are really, getting to the point where they'll start to come off. And still, even with some of the things that we're seeing, conventional supply out of the US is at a cost advantage to some of the supply out of Bulgaria, really because of if you consider the tariff impacts. Um, Domestic organic supply is a little bit of a different story in that planting acres are down, and they're usually pretty constrained. And just the economics around, how much farmers need to grow organic is pretty high relative to the EU counterparts. So even with the added tariffs, we're still seeing where the organic options out of the EU are going to be a little bit better. But I definitely welcome, your thoughts on this, Elisa and Garrett.
Yeah, exactly right. Agree with everything you said. We're focusing on Eastern Europe. We're mostly talking about the organic sunflower kernels, or Smirks at least. Um, Over the past year, we've seen these markets come off significantly. This time last year was a very different story between conflict and drought and other different factors. Right now, the harvest is currently currently underway in the primary growing regions in Eastern Europe. We're talking about Ukraine, Bulgaria, Turkey. And expectations are for a slightly higher yield than last year's, which is good for conventional and organic. But organic should be in, reasonable supply, should be accessible. Now, global demand for sunflower, however, has dipped significantly, and the markets as a result are, flat, soft.
Sure.
So now would be a really good time to lock in, to those favorable economics. Availability shouldn't necessarily be a near or midterm concern, but the price is right now. Jump in.
Yeah, and I definitely think we have some good positions already, built up. So, for us to be able to help in the near midterm, Smirks is positioned. But if you're looking for even planning beyond that, you're right. It's a great time to do so.
So this is one of those interesting years when the domestic and the imported product are a little bit closer to the same playing field.
Yeah.
It seems
Yeah.
like.
And the tariffs coming into play, certainly aren't helping the Eastern Europe markets.
Right. Very good. Well, appreciate that so much. Kind of excited to see how it keeps going, but looks like people can, go ahead and get their coverage and go from there. Make their decision about U.S. or imported.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, let's shift gears to talk about another really big product that Smirks works with all the time, which is pumpkin seeds. And we've got some interesting options this coming season with pumpkin. And but to start off, Jessica, could you give us an update on our tried and true Chinese supply chains and kind of where that's at?
Yeah. So what we're hearing from our processing partners and kind of boots on the ground there is that new crop harvesting has begun in northwest China, but opening prices are higher than current crop levels, which has really done a funny thing in country where speculators are really taking an interest and kind of increasing their confidence to hold product and kind of slowly leak out, that into the market, which is really pushing prices higher. And then there's been word recently of some rainy conditions in some of the growing regions that have come at a time that weren't, advantageous to yields. All that being said, overall, the new crop growth looks strong, where the yields, so even though maybe planting acres aren't up significantly, the yields on the acres that were planted were initially indicated to look good. So again, to be determined with some of this rainy news information. But there was also, specifically with conventional, about 100,000 metric ton carryover, which has really, as we start to come out of this year and into next, it helps really sustain the domestic in-country demand while also still allowing exporters or folks like us, importers, to be able to get some decent value with products. So conventional is looking good right now. It's a good time to buy. I do think that locking in now would be advantageous. There's not going to be this major softening in the coming months. Organic, on the other hand, seems to be a little bit of a different story in that planted acreage is down and yields for this year are anticipated to be smaller than last year already. And then, like I said, news of this rain that just came out within the last couple of days, we'll see how that impacts everything. So our recommendation is definitely to book, out through the end, really as far as you are needing into next year. So Smirks is comfortable about trying to go and get things locked up and into the warehouse. And so we can help service some of those accounts because we're really bullish on what will happen with that pricing.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for giving us the important China update. And I'd say it's been probably since maybe 2020 where Smirks has really gotten a lot of feedback from buyers that have said, well, okay, there's the Chinese product, but what else do you have for us?
Yeah.
What other origins can you give us? And I think that's something that we've explored for a while. I mean, certainly there's the product out of Europe, but it's always been at a shorter supply and
Slightly different
cost
spec.
structure.
Yeah.
Different
A
varieties.
different spec, right? So what I'm pretty interested to hear about is, what for Garrett to enlighten us about kind of a new emerging origin that we're going to be working with out of Smirks for pumpkin.
This is
Yes,
when
we
you
have
would
some
cue the drum roll soundbite from the editor.
Smirks has joined forces with a long-term processing partner to have exclusive access to Turkish shine skin pumpkin kernels. Say that 5 times. Turkish shine skin pumpkin kernels.
There you go.
As discussed, we've been seeing the growing demand for non-Chinese everything.
Yeah.
And shine skin pumpkin is usually one of the more challenging commodities to source, outside of China in very large quantities. It is a great option. With the reciprocal tariffs being what they are in China, north of 50%, everybody needs options, and this is going to be a game changer in this industry. I'm traveling to Turkey early September, so in about 3 weeks, to qualify the farms, the cleaning lines, and the pasteurization line with this partner. And if all goes well, we will soon be the exclusive importer of one of the largest volumes of shine skin pumpkin outside of China. So stay tuned as this project develops, but this is a super cool project.
And if it doesn't go well, we're going to blame Garrett in full effect.
It's my job to manage risk. If it doesn't go well,
it's all your fault.
It's going to go great. Right. We have nothing but confidence.
Exactly.
But this is a game changer.
No, it's exciting. As being in sales, I mean, we definitely do. Even before the tariff talks, there was just always that, demand for, mainly because people just want, that different labeling or that, different story for their customers. And so I'm excited. It'll be cool. We've already seen some samples and, it's very, there's an uncanny resemblance. Like they're truly shine skin. It's not like, oh, that kind of looks like it's very spot on. They can also do the GWS. So just like we can get from the EU, counterparts. So there's a couple of different options there, but we're excited to continue to, develop this narrative for our customers and see what it looks like for several crop years to come.
Yeah.
Demand's going to be through the roof for this.
It's great. I mean, the nice thing is that we can provide options.
Right.
And for those that want to go with the Chinese product that is great, they can continue. But now we'll have another option for those that are looking for a different origin for their labels. So
Sure.
It's always a great thing to have diversity of choice, right?
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait to hear more from Garrett when he gets back. But
and pictures in the meantime when you're there.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Well, hey, let's get right into the good old drama that we always have every year with Chia. How about it?
I don't know what you're talking about. Chia has never been dramatic, Elisa. That's never been.
Yeah, no jokes. There's always something going on with Chia, and this season, no exception. The number one producer of Chia in South America is Paraguay, and they experienced a catastrophic late frost this year. I mean, just about a month and a half ago. Frost is bad at the end of the growing season for Chia. Some are estimating that about half of this new crop was damaged or destroyed, which is just bad for everybody. Sure. Chia markets are extremely firm, as you can imagine, and with no carry-in, supplies this season are going to be critically limited as a result of those frost events and that lack of carry-in. It would definitely be in buyers' best interest to reach out to our sales team and discuss availability and contract needs really for the rest of this crop year to make sure that you have, your coverage is covered.
Yep.
Organic and pasteurized Chia will be in especially short supply, so make sure that you're starting those conversations now and making sure that your needs are taken care of as soon as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I would also just add part of what makes Chia so dramatic is, just the cultural differences in the way that we do business versus other, countries. And it comes, in full effect when working with the Chia growing regions. Sometimes we don't get the most straightforward communication, from our partners. And so it makes it tough for us to be able to then develop, real-time information and updates for our customers. So we definitely get all of that out as soon as we can. But trying to get the real picture a lot of times becomes a challenge. And so I know for when you're a buyer here in the United States and you don't necessarily have, that view all the way back to origin with some of these supply chains, it seems like some of this information comes like, you're caught off guard or, feel like, wait, I thought we, could buy this. And then all of a sudden pricing is double. So we experience the same thing from the import side a lot with, specific growing regions, and chia seems to fall right into that mix. So that's definitely why it stays real spicy around here as we follow chia and the drama. So it's no different this year.
That's a great point. It might be the end of the chia. It might be the end of this current season before we actually know how much was actually harvested.
Yeah.
With almonds, we'll know in a couple of months. With chia, we won't know until the end of it.
Yep.
With such conflicting accounts.
Yeah.
Great
So
point.
I guess what you guys are saying is better to be safe than sorry.
Right.
Cover yourself as generously.
Well put.
Really. Yeah. Good to know. All right. Well, I'm going to kind of lump some of these seeds and grains together because they tend to be, those items that some of the same buyers work with. So that'll be flax, sesame, and amaranth. Jessica, could you kind of enlighten us on that trio of ingredients and what's happening?
Oh, yes. And actually I say that so confidently, but these are probably some of the items that, I don't know as strongly as some of the other ones we've talked about, but, we get these items from a couple different growing regions. So while they are lumped together, they don't necessarily follow some of the same pathways. So flax, sesame, and amaranth we can import from India, and we also do get some sesame from Pakistan. This year is interesting in that tariffs out of India have been pretty volatile and unstable. So it's actually causing us to reach out to figure out like some different alternatives with supply for those. And then flax, whereas there's been times where similar to like the US EU debacle with sunflower, or like, flax is very similar. Like it doesn't make sense to get North American flax versus product out of India. And that's always kind of what we look at every year. And it seems like this year, flax out of Canada is going to be the better option, except for we're starting to get some information trickle in about some of the yields, and especially with organic flaxseed supply, their seeded area is projected to fall, and it's actually going to be one of the smallest plantings since the 1950s. And so that'll impact, things in ways that maybe we don't quite understand at this point. But with the sharply reduced output, and there was tight carryout, and then combine that with kind of the unsteady, footing that we have with some of these imported options. I feel like it's a very much similar to chia, like better safe than sorry. Start getting with your traders about what coverage you're needing. If you do have, origins or specific suppliers dialed in, it might make sense to start being a little bit more flexible or vetting, alternative supply chains. So, again, that one I'm not living and breathing as much as some of the other ones. So we will put that with an asterisk. And if there's any updates, we will follow up with you all.
And then
Sounds
a
like-
massive potential tariff that's being finalized right now, imposed on goods from India, is certainly going to play into these markets.
Yes, definitely.
Talking north of 50%.
Right.
On that note, it's just going to be interesting to see if the situation in Canada changes as well. When our current agreement is expired, what's going to happen there? So I'm sure that's going to be interesting from a trade perspective. What happens with the Canadian as well as the Mexican crops?
Yep.
Right.
Yep. It's definitely one of those.
Always something fun on the horizon.
Kick that can down the road, Elisa. That's what we're doing. Problem for another day.
Yep, you got it. So we've talked a lot about just the sheer demand and popularity of oats on this podcast before, but
Sure.
I think it's really so. To that point, it's really important for us to give a good market update on oats. So Garrett, where are we at?
Yeah, I really don't want to jinx things by speaking too positively prematurely, But the new crop of oats in Canada looks to be in really great shape. This whole growing season, in most of the regions, with some exceptions here and there, was very favorable, for growth and development of these crops. Um, our hopes are high as the harvest is just getting underway right now. Some sources indicate 5 to 7% increase in the oats uh, planted this year versus last year. Moderate carry in, and just continuing to see increased demand
Yeah.
for oats across the board. So, a lot of positivity there. Availability shouldn't be an issue this crop year. But as always, early contracts will provide, longer term cost stability, predictability at very competitive rates. But availability shouldn't be much of a concern this year.
Cool.
I like the sound of that.
It's
High
nice to
demand,
have good news
high
every once in a
availability.
while.
Yeah. If we can bring it to the people who need their oat milk, right?
Lots of granola to be
Yes.
consumed.
Right on. Okay. Well, another item that we've definitely seen an uptick, especially when you're talking about the flakes, is quinoa. Um, Quinoa flakes have just been kind of crazy, but we should talk about whole quinoa as well. Jessica, what do you have for us on that?
Well, Peru and Bolivia experienced some heavy rains in early spring, which delayed the quinoa planting. And so we're actually seeing significant impacts to yields on quinoa, which then in turn, any kind of quinoa derivatives like flakes, end up tightening as well. Um, and so we are hearing and are seeing, firsthand that the crop is anticipated to remain short, through the rest of this year. And quinoa isn't necessarily, it's not a fall harvest commodity. There's a smaller harvest in some of the growing regions in November, but again, we're not hearing positive news about that. But typically, we start to see new crop offers in, May, April April, May timeframe. I should say that chronologically. And then shipments for new crops start to, leave and hit the United States June, July area. And we really didn't see the relief that was needed this last, go around. So we came in with not a lot of carryover. Demand was firm, and then not a lot of relief from the new crop. So this one's going to remain tight. Pricing has definitely firmed. We do anticipate it to continue to firm. So another one where, if you're able to cover with some foreplanning, that's definitely important with this item, especially quinoa flakes. And the, again, compounding factor is tariffs. So where we're already seeing commodity pricing rising on the raw material, you have the added layer of, the tariff impacts. So prepare for quinoa to cost more than it has historically for the last several years. So.
Thank you for those insights. Good to know. Um, One of the big topics that has been all over at Smirks has been really the coconut market,
Oh,
as we all know, this past season in particular. Supply has just been really tight and demand has been high, especially with significant exports of the raw nuts to China. This is a category that we watch closely, keeping tabs on what's happening in the Philippines, Sri Lanka, Indonesia, and Vietnam. So I'd really like for us to break it down by product category. And so maybe we can start with coconut oil. Garrett, talk to me about coconut oil.
Yeah, this year has been filled with challenges for those in the world of coconuts. We've seen global demand continue to increase dramatically, driven heavily by China. The demand increase, coupled with very uncooperative weather in the coconut growing regions, has driven raw coconut costs to near historic high levels. And that, of course, flows through to the finished specs that we import and distribute. Um, I've actually, in the last year, visited most of the large coconut growing regions personally, and seen firsthand the challenges that these farmers and producers have faced. And I don't envy them. It's tough between El Nino, La Nina, typhoons, you name it. It's been one thing after another for these poor folks, and we're hoping things improve. As far as oil is concerned, VCO, virgin coconut oil, is pretty steadily available right now, and RBD is reasonably tight. It would be in your best interest to review your forecast and make sure that you have a plan, purchasing plan. And the costs are going to remain on the higher side, but the availability is going to be somewhat challenged, as we continue to move forward.
All right. Well, we appreciate the insights on the oil. And if we dive into desiccated coconut, I mean, this is a major category as well. It encompasses fine macaroon, medium, chips, and coconut smiles. Jessica, could you give us some insights on this market?
Oh, yes. Well, as you would imagine, desiccated coconut follows a lot of, right in step with the oil market. So like Garrett mentioned, in like that category, we've seen pricing very firm and availability remain, very tight. Internally, we've seen demand kind of vary pretty widely by spec. So we've, just even recently, we've seen an uptick in inquiries for, buyers for medium shred, more so in the last few weeks than we had for a few months there, where it seemed like stuff was pretty steady and then all of a sudden a sharp increase. And what that tells us is that, the market must be drying up on some of these cuts, in that maybe where someone was buying regularly before and had a pretty steady supply, now they're turning to other folks, supply alternatives like Smirks as an option. And a lot of that is being driven by the fact that for several months, it was just very hard to get regular shipments out of origin. We're starting to see some of that ease a little bit, and we do have some solid positions booked. And again, not trying to jinx things, but it seems like things are flowing a little bit more steadily from origin than compared, the last 3 to 6 months. And so we've been working really close with our processors on both the desiccated and just availability also kind of, as a segue into the next category there, around those manufacturers that are making coconut cream and milk, because we've, really just been managing those demands from our customers is kind of hand in hand here. So recommendation on desiccated and probably oil, very similar. If you can cover at least through the end of Q1 and kind of get through this level of uncertainty, that's highly recommended. But also prepare yourself that, we're not going to see maybe a huge market correction that we, everybody maybe was hoping for. I think there's just some bigger issues in the supply chain that will keep, competition for raw material tight and firm and keep, processors really having to offer pricing at higher levels to keep their production and operations running.
Yeah, definitely think it would be wise to have coverage through Q1, Q2 of next year, just to be safe.
Yeah, appreciate that. It still seems like we're carefully navigating.
It's going to be one of those hindsight of it was 2020 type of things, and we're going to be like, yeah, we were right on, and we're going to be like, wow, we sounded, didn't know what we were talking about. One or the other, Lisa.
Oh, we're right.
We're right on. Yeah, I like it.
On a bright note, I feel like coconut cream is something where, we've seen a really interesting increase in popularity, and the product is flowing pretty well right now. It's a great non-dairy alternative used in baking, cooking, beverages, desserts, and other products. So I'd love to hear Garrett tell us more about coconut cream and kind of what's happening there.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see the popularity and the demand increase around coconut cream. It's such a cool product. So much that you can do with it, so many different options for use. Real quick, a clarification about what coconut cream is. Coconut cream is the higher fat liquid extracted from the coconut meat or the copra, not to be confused with coconut water, which is a liquid that's present inside the kernel when you first crack it open. So just making sure we're talking about the same things here. High cost and limited availability of the copra or the raw coconut meat have been persistent challenges for producers at origin for quite some time, leaving many producers weeks or months behind fulfilling orders. Coconut products, including cream, have traded at near historic high levels this year, but we may be seeing a bit of relief soon. Costs are not likely to come down that much, but it's likely we'll see a small dip and then a more stable market moving out of 2025. We all need to come to terms with the fact that a higher baseline cost is the new normal for coconut products. The large players domestically are not holding very much inventory across the coconut categories, And some suppliers are not offering product until Q3 of this year or Q1 of 2026. It would definitely be wise to have your needs covered again through Q2 of next year because availability is likely to be a challenge.
Yep, very well put, Garrett.
It's really sounding like a bit of a broken record, folks, but
Yep.
it's because it's all coming from the same cocoa nut, right? But on the other hand, let's talk about other products because it's fun to talk about some of the stuff that we're doing, especially coconut milk powder. What can we say about it, Garrett?
Yeah, broken record on the market conditions, broken record on what the suppliers are dealing with. All the previously discussed market conditions and pressures also apply to the world of coconut milk powder. Coconut milk powder or coconut milk is simply the diluted coconut cream, and coconut milk powder is achieved by spray drying the coconut milk. And this is a really cool ingredient. Good, high-quality coconut milk powder is getting hard to source these days because of raw material challenges and a number of other factors. We are excited to announce that we have reached an exclusivity agreement with one of the largest and best producers in Vietnam. They produce a variety of coconut products, but their coconut milk powder is top-notch. I've been visiting this facility a couple times a year for the last few years as they've been building this line and the spray drying plant. And it's beyond impressive. It's like a surgical clean room. It's just mind-boggling. And I've seen a lot of factories and a lot of good and a lot of bad. And this is top-notch stuff. Give our sales team a call, discuss your CMP needs, request samples, and taste for yourself really the superior quality of this particular item.
That's exciting news, Garrett. I mean, when you came back with the report that we had this signed, sealed, and delivered, and it's a beautiful factory, just very, very fun fact that Smirks can really offer such robust supply chains of this item.
Yeah, that's such a huge win for Smirks and for our customers to have a partner of this caliber that is all ours.
Yes, definitely. And it's been such an item and a category that we've been growing since I started here. And so it's really awesome to see not only the growth in the consumption of the item, but just the way that Smirks has kind of been, really always looking for a great solid supply option or multiple supply options for this item because it's something that we really just believe in as a coconut item. It does a lot of really cool applications and very versatile ingredient for sure.
Yeah, we don't see demand for coconut milk powder falling off anytime soon. This is just going to get bigger and bigger.
Well, speaking of growing categories, I feel like it may be still somewhat fledgling, but coconut water powder has really been growing in demand in the last few years. And it's been interesting to see like it popping up on different ingredient decks, like all the hydration products, for example. So Garrett, talk to us about that product.
Yeah, this is another product that's been really exciting to see the popularity growing around. It's such a smart concept, and not just for the dry blend customers, but for those in the liquid beverage category. Shipping coconut water powder is so much more efficient than shipping coconut water. It's just spray dried coconut water. So it's the same thing. You rehydrate it, and you have coconut water. It's so much more efficient and cost effective than shipping in the liquid form.
Well,
based on what I've seen.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, not to mention just the idea of if you're a brand and you're looking for ways to diversify a product line, but not go off too far. You could have your ready to drink options that are on the refrigerated space, and then now you can develop another product that's very same family of items using a different formulation, but for the customer ends up being a new delivery method for the same type of product. And shelf space is, not as much, in the retail perspective, if you're filling a dry shelf space versus a refrigerated shelf space. So it becomes very diversifying for brands as an ingredient.
Yeah, definitely the case. Based on what we've been seeing from the production side and from the inquiries on the customer side, it doesn't look like the popularity is going to diminish on this either. This is going to continue to grow and continue to become, one of the most popular food ingredients.
Yeah.
For innovation.
Yeah.
Very exciting. All right. Well, no coconut market report would be complete without talking about coconut sugar. So, Jessica, what do you have for us on coconut sugar? You know, we've had some supply challenges the last months. So, what are we seeing now?
Well, while no market report would be complete, I don't, have anything that's terribly different from the things, so it might be a little bit brief as far as the update here, but we've seen it follow a lot of the same trends we've already talked about. Coconut sugar specifically really comes out of Indonesia as a growing region, so it does have some of its own unique challenges, but the biggest challenge that we saw with coconut over the last, 6 to 12 months actually came from some of the backlogs tied to the organic, new organic regulations and being able to get organic transaction certificates all the way down to the different supplier groups, just because of the nature of the coconut sugar supply chain. So we've started to see some of, relief there, and it just seems like, kind of with some of these other ones where it's like just constant drama. I feel like that's how coconut sugar has always been a saga around here since I've started. So where we have very high highs and then very low lows. And so it seems like maybe we're turning the corner and we have some pretty good, positions built up. We're starting to build up stocks where we're not, as hand to mouth. Our processing partners, are seeing some more favorable news. But, again, that raw material, the competition for raw material is a real thing that they're facing. So the price for coconut sugar, we're not anticipating any softening soon. We're just glad we're able to get it at this point. It was kind of one of those things where it was just hard to come by, at any price. So that's kind of nice. Definitely get in front of your trader with that item as well. Ramadan comes a little earlier this year than we've seen historically. So that always puts a very interesting kink in the coconut sugar supply chain, just because, there's just not production happening for a very specific amount of time. So if you don't have, product on the water and ready to come in, you kind of wait for a little bit and then you have to kind of catch up. So but that's something that we are able to plan for. So if you're able to get with your Smirk's, trading associate, they should be able to walk you through some of that and also help you with some spot needs in the meantime, because we do have finally some, we're not hand to mouth on that one. So
Yay.
yeah.
It's about time.
And again, I knock on all the wood that is around, because hopefully we're not jinxing things. So
Yeah, I hope we're not.
yeah.
Anyways, at this
Yes.
moment, folks.
At the time of this recording.
Yes. All right. Well, one more thing to round out coconut, which I find really interesting, is the coconut water concentrate.
Yeah.
And Jessica, could you give us kind of the one-on-one, not the one-on-one, excuse me, the
Yes.
101, all about this product?
Well, what is interesting about this one is it's kind of a newer one that we're following in Smirks. It's follows the trends that we've seen, and so we've been working with processors that make coconut cream and all of these other items. Then they also make coconut water concentrate. So it's kind of a natural progression for us. But where it's kind of interesting, and where we're talking about it in the line of our coconut items here is you might be able to even consider this as a sweetener. So it can be used in the beverage category, and it's often used in that way, where basically it takes, the processors take the coconut water, and it's sent to some level of an evaporator. And the evaporator is done in such a way where it's gentle enough heat that it reduces the product's boiling point, to where the product can evaporate, but without losing its nutrient density that you would see if it was, your typical high heat process. So by doing that, the concentration reduces the product to typically 60 to 70 bricks, which that amounts to about 15 times. So like if you take, one serving of this and, rehydrate, it gives you about 15 times the volume that it started at. It's cooled quickly, and then it's packed aseptically, and is typically stored in, this will ship frozen, and it's stored in frozen containers and warehousing. So that's where we'll see. But like Garrett said, it achieves a freight efficiency that is better than shipping water. And then the piece that's very fascinating is by being such a concentrated version of the product, it's actually really naturally sweet. So if it's not fully diluted, it can be added into different beverages or applications. as a sweetener without having all of the natural or added sugars that are required for that labeling. So it becomes a really great option for some clean label items as well. So this one's interesting in that some of the bigger players of coconut water concentrate from an import perspective, we've seen have kind of dialed back a little bit. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in the market, and now here Smirks is stepping right into that gap, and so we're excited to really start helping customers with their coconut water concentrate needs.
That's such a cool innovation. I mean, think about the freight efficiency there. You get basically 15 and a half containers shipped for the price of one.
Exactly.
It's unbelievable.
My grandma would love a deal like that, so she
right. I love a deal like that.
So let's move into a category that's near and dear to my heart, dried fruits. And in addition to our tried and true dried fruits like apples and mango that Smirks has been importing, we're kind of excited this year to emphasize more sourcing of innovative dried fruits. And a lot of these are single ingredients. So talk about, clean ingredient decks. The single ingredient items are pretty cool. In general, before I get into our what this market intel unfolds, just want to say that if you're trying to innovate in this category, please reach out to us, because we've got some new interesting stuff that we're working on. And without diving too much into it, I just want to say we've got options for you, so hit us up. But on another note, Garrett, I have a pop question for you. What fruit is nicknamed the king of fruits?
Oh, man. This could go a couple different directions. I'm going to go with mango.
Bingo, you got it. And I think that came from India, because it's just like everybody eats mango. They eat so much that they hardly export any of they really don't produce much in the way of dried mango that at least gets exported. It's all consumed in India. So anyway, just a little bit of trivia.
Fun fact indeed, Elisa. I'm going to tell my kids that.
It's either banana or mango.
Yeah. Mango.
Yeah, mango. So diving into mango, Mexican crop, which is typically running from about June to September or so, has definitely been challenged by droughts and changing weather patterns this past season. And of course it's still going, but it's definitely been causing lower yields, which doesn't help the growing demand, because there's just been a continued high interest in putting mango, packing it in a bag as a straight pack, or for a mix, or putting it into energy bars, you name it. So prices have really remained high, and supply has continued to be limited. Smirks is really, we've had for quite some time now, the past few years, product out of Peru, but this year we're really kind of doubling down on it. We've really helped our supplier boost his yield with more production capability on organic dried mango. So we're pretty excited with that product, expected to land somewhere around January, because the season starts basically at the end of the year. We'll start with the Edwards variety, which is not the most popular, but still a nice, more of a subtle flavor. And then we move into the Kent, which is what most people are used to. And we'll have a good mix of strips and, of course, cheeks. And if you're looking for organic or conventional product, please reach out to us for coverage. We do focus on organic, but we can help you with conventional as well. And honestly, I don't know what's going to happen, because again, we're at this moment, we still have some availability, but hopefully by the time you hear this, we'll still have availability, because it is pre-selling pretty fast. Jessica, what new single ingredient dried fruit are you most excited about Smirk's importing this fall?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked, Elisa, because we started recently importing organic banana coins. We've always had a line on like the sweetened and unsweetened banana chips, But this product is really awesome because it's for that different application. It's the, softer coins that seem to be a great standalone snack, like you said, good for the straight repack. So now we have a Sri Lankan organic banana coin available. It'll start kind of in our East Coast stocks. And even with the tariffs, we're seeing, where we're able to offer for a pretty competitive price. So between the straight repack or trail mixes, I think it'll be a really nice addition to our dried fruit repertoire.
Right on. I'm excited about it as well. So awesome. Looking forward to that. And dried apple has been something, of course, that Smirks has imported for quite some time. And
Yes.
of course, we focus a lot on organic, but now we've got a great conventional supplier domestically as well. So we've only seen demand continue to increase for the dried apple, and actually just had a huge run on the dices and sold out a lot of those, but still hit us up because we can offer this product, and it's a great single ingredient fiber rich dried fruit that you can put in your snacks and your trail mixes, baking cereals, what have you. And one thing that kind of stands out about the product that we import from Argentina is the fact that we can offer the apple rings, because
Mhm.
this is unique. You can't really find the rings themselves. It's a more challenging, time-consuming cut to produce.
Oh,
Not as
sure.
many suppliers do it. So you may not find it from Chile or from the U.S., but we do offer it out of Argentina. So hope people will hit us up. We do have a good stock of it on the East Coast. Um, so that's there for the picking, so to speak.
Sure.
And
See what you did there.
Yeah. And Garrett's not that quick, so way to lay that down.
how about cranberries? Jessica, do you want to fill us in on sugar infused and apple juice infused cranberries, organics?
Yes. Yeah. I like how you guys save all the dramatic, saga-filled options for me to go on about. But cranberries very much in that, realm where it's just a crop that seems to get smaller each year, where demand seems to stay firm and or like a little bit of increased demand in organic cranberries. But the crop size and the plantings just remain tight because it's such a, the economics associated with growing organic cranberries are just not as enticing as their conventional counterparts. So a lot of that, a lot of the cranberries that are grown are really, focused in that conventional market. So this crop year is seeming to be no exception, or shaping up to be no exception to that. And there was no carryover. So like that's the other piece that will really make this market tight. So Smirks actually had, kind of a couple windfalls with cranberries over the last, few months where we were able to land a few loads. So we have a small carryover of organic sugar infused. And then we'll be, waiting very patiently for organic options to be available kind of October forward. But, even that is TBD a little bit with what the processors are going to be able to offer. And one of the main processors that we work with are one of the only ones to do apple juice infused. So that makes that market even that much smaller, where some of the other big players really focus on the sugar infused. So all that is to say, it's going to be a tight market with supply that will likely outpace demand from start to finish. So the earlier you can plan, the better. And even in that case, it may make sense to start having some folks help you with alternative items and ways to get creative around that spec.
Yeah, I hear you. And you're on a roll with these types of items, tight markets. I think you're doing a great job. So I'm gonna let you take over on organic goldenberries as well.
I would love to echo the same sentiments, copy or cut out cranberries, insert goldenberries, basically. So similar to, some of the things that impacted quinoa, the same type of weather patterns impacted the goldenberries and some of the earlier growing time frames. And so there's not a lot of raw material available. And so right now is kind of when all of that is being processed. And firsthand as you've been trying to, service some different accounts with this item, it's like we, think, okay, we're going to get this amount on this next container. And all of a sudden, because truly the raw material is that tight at origin, we're getting as much as we possibly can, but it's still really not enough to fulfill the demand that we're seeing. So, and that's just, the small Smirks picture. So take that across the industry. There's, demand that's going unfulfilled at this point, even with new crop availabilities. So that'll start, trickling into the United States here in the next couple months. But we do expect that one to remain tight. Pricing has firmed. It's definitely higher this year compared to previous years. And we definitely think that if you do have any kind of projects planned around golden berries, definitely share your demand needs and forecasts with your trader, and we can work to tell you where we can help, and also, again, give you some guidance on what's feasible and what's not.
All right. Well, I think that wraps up quite the market report. I know this has been a lengthy one, and so I appreciate our listeners hanging in. But I hope you found some good nuggets of information here. And Jessica and Garrett, I really want to thank you for putting out all of your knowledge and insights about the different fall harvest crops. It's been super helpful, and I personally have learned a lot.
No,
Yeah, appreciate you letting us jump in here.
Yeah, and also, same to you, Lisa. You always do such a wonderful job organizing these. Always a pleasure to join in with you, and I feel a little bit more equipped to go chat with customers now too. So,
all right.
Holy cow, that was a lot of information.
Yes, awesome. Exactly. And we'll basically have to follow up with a 2.0 after Garrett gets back from Turkey, and we can do a deep dive into the pumpkin here. So
with good news, you bet.
Yes, exactly.
To your point, stay tuned from Smirks, whether that be on LinkedIn or email updates or upcoming podcasts. So with that, I'm going to wrap up this episode 18 of Get the Scoop with Smirks, and we hope that you all have found some great insights on the fall 2025 harvest, market trends, pricing, wonderful tariff information, as helpful as you can, for your planning in the upcoming months. And remember, supply and demand can shift quickly, so staying informed is key. And that's what we're here for at Smirk. So hit us up when you need help. And until next time, keep your scoop handy and happy sourcing.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.
See you guys.